Yevamos Daf Kuf Daled begins with a Mishnah and contains one additional Mishnah discussing the halachos of chalitza. The first Mishnah discusses two halachos. Are you allowed to do chalitza at night, and can you do chalitza with the left foot? Machlokes in each of those. The second Mishnah will introduce which of the aspects of a chalitza procedure are ma'akev, which are necessary. There are three steps. There's a reading of the parsha, there is the removal of the shoe, and there's the spitting. Which one can you do without and still be kosher? Machlokes on that, and the Gemara's explanation of that machlokes. Let's begin. So we see the Mishnah has two machlokes in between Rav Elazar and the Tanna Kama. First of all, can you do chalitza at night? There, the Tanna Kama says if you did, it's kosher. It sounds like b'di'evet, and Rabbi Elazar says it's puzzle. Can you do chalitza with the left shoe? Here it's reversed according to the Mishnah. The Gemara may switch it, but it's reversed here, and Rabbi Elazar says it's kosher on the left shoe, and the Tanna Kama says it is puzzle. The Gemara is going to explain the source of each of these machlokes. And so the Gemara begins, first of all, why is there an issue to do chalitza at night? The Gemara's simple understanding is that it's because it's a ma'aseh based in, it's a court action. The based in are only allowed to hold court during the day, not at night. What then is the machlokes? So the Gemara says the machlokes is probably over that halacha. Do we say that it counts as a court action? Now, what's that based on? So that you're not allowed to do a court action at night, that is from a hekesh between Riv and Negoyim. You're not allowed to look at tzaras, the passing of tzaras at night. That's clear. The Torah says specifically biyom heraos bo. It's got to be during the day that you see it. Now, in Chumash Devarim, the Torah discusses the Kohanim and their powers, and it talks about al piyim yeh kol riv v'chol nega. Based on their word should be all disputes and all seeing of tzaras. That links riv, which is court cases, with nega, and therefore we have hekesh that says just like a nega has to be paskin during the day, a court case has to be run during the day. So the Gemara wants to say that's a machlokes here. Do we have this hekesh or not? According to Rabbi Elazar, we have the hekesh, therefore it's possible to do chalitza at night. According to the Tanna Kama, you don't have the hekesh, you can do chalitza at night. You don't connect court cases to Negayim. The Gemara says this can't be correct, because other court cases, we definitely connect to Negayim. We know the halacha is that any dinei mamonis, any monetary disputes, you can start the din during the day. You must start the din during the day. You may conclude the case at night. If it is correct that the opinion of the Tanna Kama is that there's no connection between nega and rivs, then I should be allowed to do all court cases at night. Why should I have to start it during the day? So obviously that's not the pshat. So what is the pshat then? The pshat is that what do we consider chalitza to be? Do we consider that to be a tchilas din or a sof din? Is that a beginning of a discussion or an end of a discussion? Beginning of a case or the end of a case? Does that conclude the chalitza? Does that conclude the zika, or does it end it? On the one hand, it seems to conclude it because it ends the marriage connection. On the other hand, it begins it because it requires the obligation to pay the ksuba. So that's the machlokes. The Tanna Kama holds that it counts as the end of the din, therefore you could do it at night. Rabbi Elazar says it counts as the beginning of the din, therefore it has to be done during the day only. Now the Gemara brings the halacha said by Nemar. The Gemara quotes Rabbah. According to other versions, it was possibly Rava, Bar Chia, Kutusfa, and he did the following story. He presided over a chalitza that was performed with a muk, that's like a leather sack. It was with one individual presiding, not a beis din of three, and it was done at night. So these are three halachos that he did all in one case. So Shmuel said, look how great, he said scornfully, look how great is this rabbi that he does things in accordance with a single opinion. He does things according to a das yachid. So Mara wants to know, what was the das yachid here? What was bothering Shmuel about this incident? Which of these three halachos is only das yachid? Muk, using a leather sock, that's not a problem. We have a brisa that says as a stam brisa, it says that. That's if it's a stam brisa without a specific name. So pashtus is, generally we assume that that's everybody. That's the chachamim, not a das yachid. So maybe he's referring to the fact that it's performed at night. So that also can be, because our Tanna Kama says you're allowed to do it at night. It's only Rav Elazar who says it's possible to do it at night. So it's also not a das yachid. So Gemara says it's referring to the fact that he had only one person presiding. We have a Mishnah, the coming Mishnah actually, further along on the daf here, discusses the halacha of doing chalitza with only one or fewer than three people presiding. So the Mishnah says the following thing: if you have two people presiding, or you had three, and then one of them turns out to be a puzzle or a carve, so you really only have two. Both these cases, Rav Shimon and Rav Yochanan and Sandler say it's kosher, and Tanna Kama says that it is puzzle. So Rav Shimon and Rav Yochanan and Sandler say two is enough. Now, there was an incident that happened of somebody who did chalitza by himself with nobody else around, and Rabbi Akiva machshir that. He was in prison, there was no other option there, and Rabbi Akiva said that's kosher even with no one presiding. That means the only person there was the Yavam himself. Now, what's the halacha here? So Gemara says Rav Yossi bar Minyumi said Rav Menachem, and the halacha is not like Rav Shimon and Rav Yochanan Sander. So Rav Shimon and Rav Yochanan Sander said that the halacha is that two people are enough. That is not the halacha. Now, there are some versions here that take this out of the Gemara because it's not relevant to the point we're making here. The point we're just trying to show is that to have one person presiding, only Rabbi Akiva holds that that's kosher and no one else holds that way. So therefore, this is what Shmuel was upset about, the fact that he presided over chalitza by himself, which only Rabbi Akiva holds that way. Now, the Gemara says the second shot is to tell you that all three halachas here are all a das yachid, even though you saw them in a stam and mishnah, they're also a das yachid. Generally, a stam and mishnah is the rabbanon, but in this case, it's only Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yossi. I have a brisa that says that Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yossi said, I saw Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha preside over chalitza with a mok, one person presiding, and at night. So, therefore, the three brises that show these three halachos are all only that one opinion. They're all a das yachid. Another Gemara goes to the next discussion, which is that of using the left shoe. So we saw that the Tanakama holds that left shoe is possible, and Rav Elazar says it's kosher. The Gemara wants to know, what is the discussion over here? Why do the Rabbanan say it's possible? Why do they say you have to use the right shoe? So the Gemara wants to say that Ula says that you learn it from Mitzorah. Mitzorah has blood applied to the big toe of his right foot, as well as to his right ear. So it says regel in discussing Mitzorah. It says bohen ragel of hayamanis. Here it also talks about a regel. You link the two, just like there it's specifically right. Here it's also specifically right. Now, what would Rav Elazar do? So obviously he would not hold of that Gzeira Shava. Regel is not something that he has a drasha based upon. The Gemara says, but that can't be, because Rav Elazar has a Gzeira Shava based on the word ozen, where it says ozno hayamanis, that you have to use the right ear. He learns from there that when you pierce the ear of an eved who wants to stay, that also has to be the right ear, and that's a linkage of ozen. So if he has a linkage to Mitzorah through the word ear, he should also have a linkage to Mitzorah from chalitza to Mitzorah through the word regel. How do you avoid that? So, therefore, the Gemara has a problem. So, the Gemara wants to say, okay, maybe you have to switch the opinions here. You have to switch the opinions in the Brisa, and Rav Elazar is the one who says that it's kosher because he has the limud to Mitzorah, and the Chachamim don't have a limud to Mitzorah, and therefore they say that you do not require the left, you do not require the right shoe specifically. Says Gemara, there's another pshat which you could say over here, and that's that you could make the limud you could hold of the limud from ear and not hold of the limud of regel. Why is that? Because ear has an extra word on both ends, both in the discussion of a eved having his ear pierced and the Taras and Mitzorah both have an extra word ear, have an extra ear, and therefore you can make a limud. And even if you have a pircha, you can't make a pircha when you have a Gzeira Shava from a word which is extra in both places. That's a rule that Rav Elazar has said elsewhere. We learned that twice in this Masechta. Now, regel is only extra on one side. Now, where are all these things extra? So in Mitzorah, both ozen and regel, they're both extra because the Torah repeats the entire procedure discussing an ani, a poor Mitzorah. That's all extra. Could have just said to do the same thing. So there, it's both, they are extra. Now, regel is not, there is no extra regel in the case of the Torah's discussion of chalitza. So therefore, when you're trying to make a drasha regel, it's only extra on one side, and therefore you have a pircha, you can mess up this drasha, and therefore Rav Elazar doesn't hold of the drasha because he has a pircha. However, as far as ozen, there is an extra ozen in the discussion of the making the hole in the ear of the eved. It says ozen there twice is an extra time, and therefore you can't make any pirchas because you have extra on both ends. Now, what is the pircha? When discussing making a pircha, what can we use to block the limud from Mitzorah to other places? The Gemara says because Mitzorah is an extra strict halacha, it requires the 8 eres, the cedar wood, and the azov, the moss, the grass, and the shnei tolas, the red thread. It's an entire procedure that's required that you don't find anywhere else, and therefore you can't learn from there to any place else necessarily, unless it is extra on both ends. So therefore ozen you could learn, and regel you cannot learn. All right, this concludes the Gemara's commentary on the Mishnah. Now we get to our next Mishnah. We now begin the next Mishnah, which discusses two primary areas of halacha. First of all, what if one of the steps was left out of the chalitza procedure? Second of all, what if one of the participants was not fully mentally capable? So the Mishnah begins. There are three steps in chalitza: the removal of the shoe, the spitting, and the reading of part of the parsha of chalitza. So if you left out the reading, everybody agrees it's not ma'akev, it's kasher chalitza. If you left out the shoe step, the removal of the shoe, everybody agrees it's a pasul chalitza. That is no good. Now, if you left out the spitting, so now you have a machlokes between Rabbi Elazar who says it's pasul and Rabbi Kiva who says it is kosher. Says the Mishnah that they actually discuss it. So a maisa is ma'akev, a certain action that's performed. Now, Rabbi Elazar says you see that because what she has to say, what we say to the guy is this is what we do to the man who does not want to build his brother's house. So this is what we do. The doing part is what's essential. Anything which is in action is essential. That's why we all agree that reading the parsha, which is just called talking, that's not called doing, that's not essential. If you didn't do that, it's not pasul. But that's why Rabbi Elazar says, I say that you got to do the spitting because the spitting is in action. Says Rabbi Kiva, no, it says ye'aseh la'ish, something which is done to the man. The spitting is not done to the man. Spitting, she just spits. The removal of the shoes of the man is done to the man. That's what's ma'akev. That's what's necessary. Okay, second half of the Mishnah. What is the halacha about a cheresh? It's the person who is a deaf mute, and in times of Chazal they couldn't learn anything, therefore they did not have das. So a deaf mute, their chalitza is pasul, whether the woman was the deaf mute, the woman was the cheresh, or the man was the cheresh, it's a pasul. The only way to get out of that zika is to actually do yibum and then give a get. Now, a katan and a ktana is as follows. So the chalitza of a katan is pasul. That's no good. The Mishnah says a ktana, you could do chalitza to a ktana. It doesn't count fully. Well, she has to do the chalitza. It doesn't count fully until she grows up, but then she has to do it again. If she doesn't do it again when she's an adult, it's pasul. So it's really not too functionful in her katana situation. And then we get the part of the Mishnah quoted earlier, where we had what happens if you have only two judges presiding. So either there were only two or there were three and one was found to be a pasul or a karev. So Rav Shimon and Rech and Hassan say it's kosher. And then he quotes an incident that happened where somebody did a chalitza in jail, and the story came from Rabbi Kiva, and he was machsher. The Gemara begins, and the Gemara wants to go into what exactly is the psul of a cheresh. There's two possibilities. First of all, a cheresh, we could say, doesn't understand what's happening. And second of all, we could say that a cheresh can't speak. A cheresh is one who cannot hear or speak. So what exactly is the psul? So the Gemara is going to have two versions of this. We have to compare a cheresh to the fact that the Mishnah says that you don't have to say the parsha, which seems to indicate that speaking is not the point. And then afkamina and all this will be, what if you have somebody who has das but can't speak? That's what's called an ilaim or an ilames. So there's two versions of this Gemara. The first version, Rava understands that from the fact that we say that you don't have to say the parsha shows that speaking is not ma'akev, you don't have to speak. The problem with the cheresh therefore must be that they don't have das at all, but an ilaim and an ilames who have das, they could do chalitza, they don't have to speak, and don't have to say the parsha at all. This is Rava's first version. The Gemara rejects this because the Rabbi Yanni says clearly the problem with the cheresh and a chereshes is that they can't speak. And therefore, according to that, an ilaim and a lemes should also be problematic, and they can't speak. So says the Gemara, the correct version of what Rava said was the other way. Rava refers to the second part of the Mishnah, and he says from the fact that a cheresh and a chereshes are pasul, you see that the problem is that they can't speak, that the correct interpretation is because they can't speak, like Rabbi Yanai said, not because of the fact that they don't have the das. Therefore, an ilaim and a lemes would also not be allowed to do chalitza. They can't do it either. And the question is, why does the Mishnah say that they don't have to speak if they didn't say the parsha? It's fine. That's not a problem. The Gemara says is a concept called kol harei lebila ein bila makeves, something brought by Reb Zeir, which says you have to be able to do something, but you don't have to do it. We have this in the mixing of certain ingredients of a korban mincha. You have to have all of them, and they have to be present and mixable. If you didn't actually mix it, it's not makev. But if you couldn't mix it, that is makev. So here, not being able to say the parsha is a problem. Actually, saying the parsha, you could get away with that. The Gemara now goes into halachas of spitting that are mentioned in the Mishnah. And we're going to see, interestingly, an opposite concept from the one we just said from Reb Zera. So the halacha that's brought over here is Avud Shmuel. They sent a message to Avud Shmuel. What happens if the Yevama in court spits towards one of the brothers? So he paskin that spitting creates enough of a beginning of the chalitza that they can't do yibum now. That's not a complete chalitza, but it's enough of a chalitza that the yibum is no longer an option. That means that he's holding that the spitting is an essential part of the yibum of the chalitza step. It's an essential part of the procedure, and it's already begun, and you can't go back. So the Gemara says, which Tana is it going in according to? Rabbi Akiva in our Mishnah said that spitting is not ma'akev. He said that if she didn't spit at all, it's a kosher chalitza. Now, obviously, then he holds that spitting is not an essential part of the chalitza. Why would he then say that it puzzles her on the brothers? The Gemara goes a step further. In Karbonis, you have a concept that you can't eat the meat until you burn the parts that go on the Mizbech. But that's only true if the parts that go on the Mizbech are still here. If the parts that go on the Mizbech are lost, then you don't need to have them. Then you could eat the meat. So that means in a situation where you could do the mitzvah and you didn't, that's a problem. That's ma'akev. Rabbi Akiva holds here the Yevama could do the spitting and she didn't. It's not a problem. Even there, even though she could do the mitzvah, she could spit, she didn't. It's still not a problem. So it's totally non-essential. It's not even like a karbonis where if it's there, it's a problem. It's non-essential. Yeah, you'll do it if you want to do it. If she's there, you should do it as part of the mitzvah, but it's totally not essential. So it can't be that he holds that if she spit towards the brothers, then you can no longer do the rest. You can no longer do yibum. It already apostles for yibum. So the Gemara says, who is it then? So maybe you'll say that it's Rebbe Lazar in the Mishnah who holds that if you didn't do spitting, that does passel that if you didn't do spitting, it's ma'akev and it's not a kosher chalitza. That means he's showing that it is an essential part of a chalitza. Problem is that Rebbe Lazar holds that if you have two things that matir in karbonis, you need two steps to matir something. You got to do both of them. Either one alone has no effect. So, for example, if you need to do shchita and tzrikas adam in order to allow a carbon to be eaten, if you do one and not the other, it doesn't change the status at all. So, here, if you need to do both chalitza of the shoe and the spitting in order to change the status, if you just did one, it shouldn't change the status even partially, and the brothers should still be able to do yibum. So, Gemara says it's a third opinion. It's the opinion of Rebbe. And we see this in a brisa which quotes the halachos of the lambs of Shavuos, the kivsei atzeres, and the bread that's brought along with them, the shtei halechem. So there we're going to see that Rebbe holds that if you do one matir out of the two, it does change the status enough to make yisurim. So let's see that brisa. So the brisa says that when you bring the two loaves of bread that come with the carbon on Shavuos, that's the shtei halechem. So when did the two breads get kedusha? When did they become kedusha saguf? And they have the halachos that if you take them out of the Beis Hamikdash, they are puzzle. In addition, that they're ready to be eaten, they're mutar b'achila because they're already in this kadesh. So the Gemara says it happens when you bring the carbon, when you shecht and do the avoda of the two kivasim, that's when the lechem gets kedusha. Now, there are two steps to the carbon. There's the shchita, the slaughtering, and the zrika, the application of the blood onto the mizbeach. So what happens if you only do one of the two? So the brisa says as follows. If you did both of them lishma properly, so then the lechem is niskadesh, everything's fine. If you did neither of them properly, you did them both shalol lishma, like for the shame of the wrong carbon, then it's definitely not niskadesh. What happens if you did the shchita lishma, but not the zrika? So you did part of the way. So Rabbi Elazar holds nothing happened. You have to have both matirim, like we said earlier. And that's why Rabbi Elazar here holds that you didn't do any chalitza at all, you didn't create any isser if you just did one of the two, if she just spit and she didn't do the actual chalitza. Now, Rebbe there argues. Rebbe says that if you did the shchita lishma properly and the zrika improperly, it creates the isser of Yotze. It's not able to leave the Beis Hamikdash, but it doesn't create the hetir, it doesn't create the permitted state. That fits perfectly with this opinion here that Avud Shmuel said that if she spits and she doesn't remove the shoe, it creates the isser on the other brothers, but does not matir her l'shuk.